Okay, let's get started.
Right.
Yeah, it's after 10. Okay, so this first one, if anybody wants to chime in on what if this has happened or what they had to do to make it right. Okay, so you represent the buyer. You write an offer on a home that has a ton of personal property. The seller is at home during the showing. They tell the buyers, we're going to be moving to assisted living and we don't know what we'll do with all this stuff. And the buyers tell the sellers, hey, if we buy your house, don't worry about it. We'll take care of all the items. So your buyers write an offer and it's accepted. During the final walkthrough, the sellers are at home and they tell the buyers, we're going to leave everything in the garage, which included a lawnmower and tools and shovels and all that sort of thing. But the day of closing, the buyers are moving in and all that good stuff is gone. And now basically what they're left with is trash. What could we have done to prevent that from happening?
Have it in writing. And the
Yeah, because it sounds really good though. It sounds like, these are elderly people, they're going in assisted living. They don't really want all that stuff. They don't want to deal with it. I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
It's very annoying when you keep on texting.
Steve, did you say something? You're on mute.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Having technical difficulty here.
Okay. Kay, what about you? What do you have to say about this?
Well, I'd like to say I'm happy I'm able to give you some content for your class. And yeah, this was a disaster. And in hindsight, I mean, there's probably a million things that we could have or should have done. This thing was so loaded with stuff that, it wasn't, I don't know how we could have taken an inventory of everything, but, and the problem too was, with the sellers there, the buyers and the sellers got all, huggy and sweet with each other and everything else. So, everybody, of course, is thinking things are going to happen in good faith and, they just didn't. And part of the problem was the sellers had people that were helping them. So also helping themselves to things, obviously. So
right, that's probably what happened, I'm guessing.
I think so, because I know the sellers wouldn't have intentionally just left them with a bunch of junk rather than anything of value.
Right.
And these kids, they love to do the buy and sell stuff online and everything. So, I mean, to them, they're like, oh my God, this is like treasure. And to me, I'm like, this is junk, but they agreed to it. And, but again, the problem was we did not have any kind of itemized list of the good stuff. I mean, it was just, and in all honesty, there was so much crap in there. I had no idea what was good or what was bad or what was even gone. I mean, because to me, it just all looked horrible. So, but, I think in hindsight, first of all, they probably never should have agreed to let them leave any of it,
Right.
but they thought they were helping them out. So,
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know. It was a mess. I mean, it ended up working out. The seller did pay for a dumpster to have a lot of the stuff taken away,
That's
but
good.
yeah, but I think it's only going to remove part of it. I think they're going to need to do more than just a dumpster, but yeah, so any suggestions are welcome.
So I personally would not you can't put that on the contract, those personal property items like that. The lender is gonna like it. So there is there's some verbiage that we can put together that is just between the buyer and seller. We stay out of it. The buyer pays the seller if there's any monetary value to those items, or it might be if it's $1, but if you kind of list it, but like Kay said, in this situation, there was so much stuff that it might have taken her 3 days to list it all.
Yeah.
Lynn, I actually had that same situation happen, and it was a bed and breakfast in Lafayette Square. And we literally had 2 contracts on the property before it even went on the market. And unfortunately, the buyers and sellers became very friendly with each other. And so the sellers, in this case, also offered to leave anything and everything that did not sell at the estate sale. And the buyer agreed to that, and we did an amendment in writing that said those exact facts, that there'd be an estate sale, but the seller, in lieu of having the items removed and have the home broom cleaned, would leave all those items for the buyer. And that amendment was just shared between the buyer and the seller, and Evelyn never saw it. So the day before closing, where my seller, now the husband is already in Arizona and the wife is getting ready to drive for the next 3 days with her parents and her family to meet her husband. The day of the walkthrough, the agent took about 30 photos of things that were unacceptable to her and her buyers that were left over from the estate sale, including wine glasses, clothing that was for sale, and a number of things, and insisted that all those items be removed prior to her closing. And I'll never forget, I was driving at the time, and I was driving around Lafayette Park, and I just pulled over and I proceeded to call the agent everything except white. And in order to get the deal done, it was like a $700,000 sale. So, and I had a 3.3% commission on it. So I cut the commission back by $1,000 and told them to take that and do whatever they wanted with it. And that was it. We weren't gonna do any more. So sometimes even when you have it in writing, you've got to do what's best for your client.
Right. Okay, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so number 2, you represent the buyer. They are purchasing new home, meaning new construction. Do you recommend they have an inspection, radon? How about sewer lateral? And what about a survey? So those of you that, okay,
Yes.
Steve's shaking
Yes,
his
yes.
head. Randy, what did you say? Yes?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
had
right, Everett?
one, they wanted to do the sewer section because it was new. Well, they finally did it and found out the coupling was 4 inches apart underground. It wasn't installed right. So,
Oh.
yeah, even new construction. Do it.
One of the things too, I think could happen with the sewer lateral outside is that if you've got a bunch of contractors still running around on tractors, maybe putting down sod and that sort of thing, and they run over it and crush it. Or crush the that little valve clean out thing. So I highly recommend that you do that. I'll tell you a quick story about a survey, a new construction. Had an agent that came into me and said, hey, what do you think I should do? Should I get a survey on this new construction? And I said, absolutely. So she did have it done. And what happened, those 12 houses that were built, every single one of them were 4 feet over the property line. So it was still in time that the builder could go back and redo the plats. So you wouldn't want that to happen, and 5 years later they go to sell the house and find out their house is 4 foot over the line. I know it seems like everything's new, there won't be any problems. Same thing with radon. Do you do that with, do you have a radon test when you have new construction?
Definitely.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, good. All right, number 3. You represent the seller. You have the property in the MLS as a withheld status. Photos are being taken, etc. You receive a phone call from your seller and he says, hey, just wanted to let you know that I sold the property last night. The seller tells you that they will still pay you the 3% commission. So here's what happened. We find out that that buyer is an investor and used what originally thought to be a non-board form, but what he did is he took a board form and he modified it. In other words, he removed pages and cut things out, but I could tell it was a board form at one point until he started whiting pieces of it out. So what if any problems do you foresee by letting this go through? What's the biggest thing that could happen based on what I just told you about the contract?
Your E&O insurance wouldn't cover you, would it?
Bingo, that's it. That's the main thing. Yes. So the real reason I wanted to bring this up is that we cannot take a board form of any sort and make changes to the verbiage that's already there. In other words, you can't say, you know, change a word around or do something like that. So that will get us in trouble. This particular deal has gotten very complicated. We don't want to kill the deal, but I looked up this agent who went behind the sign, basically is what he did, and went to his website, and he's advertising our listing on his website for $20,000 more. So he's trying to buy it and flip it on the same day, probably. Any questions about that? Hopefully that never happens to you.
So what do you tell the seller then at that point? You redo the
Well, the
form?
seller doesn't want us to kill the deal. He wants to sell the property. So
Yeah.
I gave the agent till Tuesday to get this resolved.
And
He went out to this property. It's out in the country, out like way out west. And he put his own lockbox on that property. He's had people going in and out of there. He told me he was doing inspections. But you know, we don't know how he found out about the property, so we have to rely on the seller to tell us that did he contact the seller direct? And the seller doesn't want to be direct with us either because they want to sell the house and the land. So it makes it complicated. Okay, number 4, you represent the buyer. The property is listed in the MLS. In the ownership field, it reads owner by contract. What's the definition of that?
I don't know what that means.
So I'll take you back to 2006 to 2008, when there were a lot of short sales. And what happened was a seller was in that short sale situation pre-foreclosure, and it was typically an agent that came along and said, hey, I'll buy the house, I'll make your payments until we get it sold. And they got it under contract and with permission, relist the property in the MLS. And when you see that owner by contract, that means they can't close on it until you close so that they have the money to make the transaction go through. And I'm going to tell you that there's some out there right now. So I wanted you to be aware of that status. So they may have bought it and they're not even doing any work. They were able to swoop in, get a great price, and they're just flipping it real quick. But you have to close at the same title company and basically at the same time in order for it to work. Yeah, I see Chuck's face and I get it. I don't like it either, but no. Okay, so number 5, you represent the seller. You receive an offer, and in paragraph number 4 on line 70, The buyer's requesting the seller to pay $5,000 in prepaids, closing costs, points, etc. Your seller accepts that offer. The buyer has a building inspection. The inspection notice comes back stating they want $4,000 in lieu of repairs. What needs to be done?
You need to do an amendment to the sales contract that says seller to pay a total of $9,000 in buyer's closing costs, prepayments, etc. Or maybe break it down an additional $4,000 for a total of $9,000.
Right, that word total has to appear in that verbiage. Because if you write an amendment for 4,000, that's what the number's going to be, is 4,000. The other thing you could do is do an amendment and amend paragraph 4, line 70 to change to 9,000. So either way would work. I just didn't want that to happen to somebody where they don't remember to add, you know, if you're the buyer, you wouldn't want that to happen to you where you got the closing table and the title company says we have an amendment for 4,000 because that's what it's going to be, is 4. Okay, this is a new one. So you list a home in the city of St. Louis. It appears to have 2 bedrooms. In order to get to the second bedroom, you must walk through the first bedroom. After a recent municipal inspection, the inspector stated you need to be able to walk out of a bedroom and into the kitchen and bathroom without going through another bedroom. Randy, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. Technically, they don't walk through bedroom as a bedroom. So if you get lucky, so here's an, you think it's a 2-bedroom, and then they do the occupancy inspection and they say you only have a load back for 2 occupants. So now you've got a limitation. So if you've advertised 2 bedrooms and you can only have 2 occupants, that could be a problem for your buyer. So I just tell people, if you're unsure, have your occupancy inspection done for your list.
Right, and I think that's the best answer, is getting that municipal inspection completed beforehand, so you don't have to deal with that. And Randy, it's the city, when you have a municipal inspection, it's good for 1 year, is that correct?
Yes, 1 year. Yeah. It's better to do it up front anyway, then the seller knows what they're dealing with.
Right, because once it's in a contract, in your contract period, the seller has 15 days to get it completed and then notify the buyer if there's items on there they don't want to fix. This way, you could have it in there with your seller's disclosure statement. Here, it passed, we've already got it completed, or here's some items that we're not going to fix.
Yeah, and keep in mind that years ago, I allowed a walkthrough to be classified as a bedroom, but not current code. So if somebody bought it 40 years ago and they're like, well, that's what it was when I bought it, it may not be the same criteria now.
Yeah, that could be a problem when you go to, the buyer could probably get some extra money out of that. I mean, we don't want to go there. That's what I'm going to say. I wouldn't want to go there with that. Okay, so number 7, you represent the seller. You receive an offer and the seller accepts. Everything is going well until our RE/MAX Gold auditing department discovers the appraisal writer for the buyer's agent used is expired. You make several attempts to get the new appraisal writer, including emails, phone calls, to no avail. What should you do? What's the number one thing when a form is expired? What does that mean?
Your E&O insurance isn't gonna cover you.
That's right. It's invalid. It doesn't exist anymore. So what do you have to do, Everett?
Call the broker.
Yeah. That's what I did. And their auditing department had not caught that, so, by the way, did you get that?
Yeah, I did receive it. If one broker has one form and the other broker has another form, how would that be resolved? I mean, if they get audited, who's gonna be liable? You know, if
Well,
we-
the buyer, it's in the buyer's hands, but who's ever audited, they're gonna write it up. They'll say we should have caught it. It'll fall onto the person who was responsible for writing the contract, but we still don't want to get hit with that, so.
well,
I need to know if you get that or not. So this was a question last night that came up, and I'll let Kristen answer that. Someone says, well, I've got these packages created in Forms R Us. I have a listing packet, I have a buyer's packet. Kristen, do you mind explaining that part?
So when you create your templates in online forms or Forms R Us, on that main screen where all of your list of documents are, at the very top, if you just have a blank template up there that has like the documents used most or just your templates, those will automatically update because they haven't been touched yet. Once you save it to the next step where you save it in your file folders and you put your seller's information or buyer's information, once you've edited it, those will not update then. So as long as it's one of your templates on your main screen where the rest of the blank forms are and they haven't been, any information hasn't been put on, they'll update. Once you've added your client's information to those documents and created a saved folder in the file folders, those will not update.
Okay, everybody good with that?
yeah, I had one other question was that, you know, normally if we're working with another company, another brokerage, another real estate firm, and they use documents, for example, in this situation to submit for their buyers. And our auditing department with Joan finds something wrong and theirs does not. Well, who's liable there? I mean, because there's always this discrepancy between companies in terms of who finds a fault with a file and someone else doesn't find a fault with the file. And it slips through the cracks.
Mhm. So that's Joan's ultimate job, is to find things that aren't correct, the outdated forms, that sort of thing. If we're the person who's writing it on an expired form, we're going to be responsible. But my experience with being audited by the MREC, they're still going to write it up that we overlooked a form that was expired, but they're going to, person who wrote the offer in this case would be responsible.
Okay.
And they may give them a warning or I don't know. Depends on how many things they find wrong with that file.
What we've done in the past is.
Okay, Kristen, we can move on. So this is something that's going on and I felt compelled to talk to you about it today. There's a few companies out there offering what's called limited service to sellers. And if you call the listing agent, here's what's going to happen when you see this. And they have it actually in the remarks, under the agent only remarks in the MLS. It'll say something like, if you call the listing agent, they're going to tell you to work directly with the seller. And if you look at the agent only remarks, it will tell you if you're writing an offer, submit to, and they'll have the seller's name and phone number, or seller's name and email address. And they only want to know this, these companies want to know only when the property goes under contract so that they can change the status in the MLS. And then they want to know when it closes so they can change the status. So ultimately what they're doing is they're charging a nominal fee to enter the listing into the MLS. So I called MLS and they said, hey, that's okay, it's okay. But I've also had a conversation with the state, one of the legal attorneys there, and Maris is following the guidelines of the National Association of Realtors. But according to the attorney for the MREC, he said, this is a direct quote, "I don't give a damn what the National Association of Realtors says. That type of service is not allowed in the state of Missouri." So I will keep you informed as to what's going to happen. I don't think it's right that, because if we're writing an offer on a limited service type agency, so then you're put in a situation when you're writing your offer on the last page of the contract, what is the seller? What kind of agency are they? They're saying they're limited service agency. That's not an option. So they said that you should consider it as a for sale by owner. Hopefully you don't have to run into that, and I would not have caught this had this situation not came up. I was putting a, hey, I'm writing this offer. I called the listing agent, they're out in California, and they said, you don't need to call me, you're going to work directly with the seller. And why I don't like it is because how can you, as a buyer's agent, work directly with the seller and not be giving some kind of advice? If you look, I'll give you the name of one company. If you want to write it down, you can Google it and take a look. So if you end up having to write on one of their listings, then the website address is home, HOME. This is all one word, coin, COIN.com. They're in San Diego, California. So
Well, and Lynn, the
familiarize
other
yourself-
issue we saw was they're allowing the sellers to either use our board forms or they can use their own seller's disclosure that they make up.
Right, so let me clarify that a couple of the seller's disclosure statements look like the seller maybe typed it up themselves or Googled it or something. And then there were a few that had MAR, M-A-R, seller disclosure statements. So it's not formatted that they're treated alike. So then I called the board, our local board, because I tried to find that company on their roster and they're not. And he said, well, they might be a member of another like St. Charles or Jefferson County. So he looks, they're not a member of any association in Missouri except for the Missouri Association of Realtors. So therefore, they didn't have to pay those board dues like we pay. Which I have a problem with that too, honestly. I'll just tell you. I think my board dues were $700 or $800, and so depending on if you have a broker's license or salesperson, that is probably why they can list properties for the commission that they're accepting. So what happens? They collect their money at the time they take the listing. So that's when they wash their hands of it and say, you got to work out the terms directly with the seller. There were a few listings in there too. I think Kristen looked at them under the agent remarks. They were referring to interest rates and that the seller would finance and the interest rate would be 3%, assumable 3%. When I talked to the attorney at the state, I thought that was a RESPA violation. He said he would let that go because it's not a banking institution offering that interest rate. It's a seller. And if a seller's offering that, they don't have to comply with the same regulations that we do as real estate agents.
You have a property address for any of those, Lynn? I can look it up.
I'll tell you what, if you go into Maris, go to the roster tab, pull down office name and type in HomeCoin. I'm gonna tell you, that's not the only company, but that's the company that I'm currently dealing with. And I honestly, I'm concerned because of our current market where we don't have inventory, that sellers, they'll Google, hey, what's the best commission or what's the best? You know, they're not thinking in terms of service, full service like we offer. And they see this number and they'll jump on it. Now, if we had, 20 houses on every street for sale, this probably wouldn't work for a company like that. So when you look it up, you'll discover they'll have things like, hey, do you need a super box? Well, then it's this much. There's a menu of items. So every item after they paid the fee is an additional charge.
Any idea what that fee is?
I do. You want to know?
Just curious.
Are you sitting down? Are you all sitting down?
Yeah,
$99.
Jesus Christ.
And
And-
if you want the board forms, it's only $20 more.
Wow.
And what are
Yeah.
what are they offering to the buyer's agent? Is that up to the
Like
seller?
2.5.
Yeah, when we were looking at those, Lynn, they were all like right at 2.5, 2.7.
Here's the thing we have to realize, because we're not really supposed to talk about commission because it's a legal issue. And we're just talking amongst ourselves right now, but there's no way that we as a buyer's agent can write an offer, submit it to a seller, work directly with them and not provide assistance. They're going to call you and ask you where, you sent this inspection notice over, these things who should I call? Where should I get this? What about the handyman service or, whatever? How do you, if they were a transaction broker, I could see it being different because they're being upfront and telling you they're going to handle the paperwork. But limited service, it's not by the rules of the MLS, but by the state law. They say you must present all offers, amendments. There's definitely, I just don't want to be in the middle of it. And right now we kind of are. So I passed it along to MLS and they're looking into it.
Hmm. I
Yeah,
wonder if then your
Hey,
broker,
Lynn,
yes.
go ahead, Rita.
I'm kind of on the site for the Missouri Association of Realtors, and I always thought if you belonged to that, you had to belong to a board. And it says in the
Nope.
first, it says in the paragraph, once you have obtained membership at the local board association level, you have access to the state national resources. So I guess they don't have to be a member, but we really need to tighten all that up. We got all these fly-by-night
Agreed.
horrible people out there.
Well, that's why I called
And
Rich Pelly.
they shouldn't be allowed to do this. I'm really glad you're on top of this, Lynn. It's just really bad. And the other thing, I
they're
just
not
want to say
using-
something.
Yeah,
Yeah, but they're cutting and pasting a contract, and that is acting like a lawyer, and you can't, that's illegal. You can't do that.
well,
Can you?
we don't know about that. That's a different deal. That's a different company that did the pasting on the
Right.
contract. We have no idea because they're simply only representing sellers for $99. We don't have a clue what their listing contract is. And by the rules of NAR says, hey, that's okay, but the state of Missouri says no. So Illinois might allow that limited service. Every state is probably have their regulations are different. But the state trumps NAR, that I can
Good.
tell you.
Oh, boy.
So that may force them out. I don't know. They may go to another state where that's allowed.
Well, I don't know. Sellers are
noticed
greedy
it.
and they're just,
Yeah. They're sitting out in California and San Diego. What were you gonna say, Neil?
I was just gonna say, if the buyer's gonna end up having to advise the seller, the buyer's agent, then I would almost tell the seller that you need to sign a deal with my broker for a transaction and pay my
Yeah, but
broker.
you can't
fee.
because legally they're under contract, the seller's under contract with HomeCoin. They have a legal
Well, I know you
listing
want to
agreement.
you want to get the deal done for your buyer, of course, but
Yeah.
I mean, do you see any?
And I will tell you this, legally, you can't tell your buyer, hey, if it's listed by this company, I'm not gonna show it to you. That'll
Right,
get you in trouble.
I get that, but you don't really need to cooperate with the seller either, other than insofar as you want to get the deal done for your buyer.
Right. And that's what, if you call this agent out in California, he's gonna tell you, don't call me.
Right,
It says right in the MLS what to do.
I don't know how the seller is going to end up any better by doing it this way.
Well, if you go back through it, I think Kristen may have pulled, or maybe Brent too, we were looking at, they had problems like basement problems or, yes, Neil, things that they were saying like, okay, it's the water in the basement, roof problems, structural problems, that sort of thing. So,
I'd be inclined to tell my buyer, ask for everything on the inspection, you know,
yeah,
force them to negotiate, and because they're not represented, they're not going to be able to negotiate as well as if they had an agent.
right.
You could probably work it pretty well for your buyer. But then I feel sorry for that seller because eventually they're probably gonna have to hire an attorney.
Yep. Why I wondered if they're not sellers that are in trouble, like they're borderline. Maybe gonna lose their house, and that's why they're looking for that type of contract.
Or they're the sellers that think they know it all.
Yeah,
That's true. We got that too, Kristen. You're right. Okay, so number 9, how many days do you have after the seller signs an agreement to make a listed price or other change?
one,
Anybody?
one,
No,
That was 2 days.
no. It's 3. So 3 business days. So, a reason I brought this up is because the other day somebody thought they had 5 days and it's not. So you have 3. Okay, Kristen, we'll go on to number 10. You represent the buyer. There's a Ring doorbell on the front door. The day your buyer is moving in, they realize the Ring doorbell has been removed and replaced with a regular doorbell. Is that okay? What do you think, Chuck?
I don't know, it's
I think you have to write that.
it's not the same doorbell that was there, but it is a doorbell, so I'm wondering if you needed to write that in your contract specifically.
Julia, what did you say?
I think you should just write it, make sure you write that in the contract, anything that you want or that you see that you expect to stay there. You need to make sure you put that in the contract.
So our contract under inclusion says security and alarm systems, that's included. But I'm gonna tell you, Julia's got the right answer. If in doubt, write it out. So there's no misunderstanding. They're not that expensive, but it's aggravating because what's gonna happen, your buyer, if you've got the buyer, they're gonna be upset about it. You're gonna run up to Home Depot and buy one just to get everybody to calm down. So in a situation like that, if in doubt, write it out. I don't know how much they are. We have one and we've had it a long time, so I don't even know what they cost anymore. Some people think because it's, you know, it's just a little wire in there or something that you can remove it, but contract clearly says all security systems, and that's what that is. Yeah, it's a doorbell, but it's also a camera with security system in it.
And the same be said for one of those Nest thermostats, you know, that you might see when you walk through the house and then they want to replace it.
I'm glad you brought that up. So what do you do if you see a Nest thermostat? Do you assume it stays? Or do you write it in?
No, those are expensive. You can't assume that.
Yeah, I would definitely write it in. Because after you close, that's when they move in and find out that they've taken it. And then everybody's all upset. So you write it in, you got a better point with the listing agent that you can go after that. Okay, we'll go on to number 11. You represent the buyer. The buyer would like to include the Sub-Zero refrigerator. You write in the included section on the sale contract, refrigerator in kitchen. On the day the buyer's moving in, the refrigerator in the kitchen is not the same as the day you wrote the offer. Now what? I can tell you, I know we've had deals where the people taken that nice refrigerator out of the kitchen and brought the one up from the basement and stuck it in there and thinking like nobody's going to know the difference. So how do we help our buyer not have to have these kind of issues? Anybody have some suggestions?
Yeah, name the brand on the offer.
That's good.
Take a picture.
That's very good. I will say this too. I've already asked the building inspector to take a picture of it and a picture of the plate, the serial plate inside the door. Because you know what, they could take the Sub-Zero out and bring an older one in and stick it in there too. Those things are expensive, and last night we talked about that a little bit because for me personally, if I'm moving that refrigerator, I hope they want it because I don't want to take it. I don't want to take the chance of it getting damaged or dented and all that kind of stuff. The prices of refrigerators have come down a lot. I mean, Sub-Zeros are still expensive. Brent was saying last night, yeah, we used to have one, but they break down a lot too. They're expensive to repair. So the idea, always be specific about what you're asking for. And again, I think asking the inspector to take a photo of it helps you too. So the next item we're talk about is, and I brought this up before, but it's worthy of bringing it up again because we had something really serious happen this week. What system do you use to keep your clients' deadline dates organized? And specifically, when you have the buyer and you've got an inspection notice that you're working on, what do you do? How do you keep your buyers organized and make sure that you've met all your deadlines?
I write them down in a day planner.
And for yourself?
Yes.
And what do you do? Do you involve your buyers in those dates?
I take responsibility myself.
You do? I think that's great, but what happens if with everybody's changing, let's say, you want to make your offer look really good and you tighten that inspection notice time frame. Let's say you shorten it to 7 days. Let's say that. and you forgot, and you're thinking it was 10. But you're saying, Chuck, you write it down once the offer's accepted.
Yeah, I missed one loan commitment one time. And once that happened, it never happens again.
All right.
You know, you make that mistake, you don't make a deadline date mistake again. I bring somebody else in to help you if you're that busy. But I take responsibility for it. I make sure.
Julia, what do you use for Sarah? What system?
We email out a contract timeline after the contract gets accepted to the buyers or sellers, whoever it is. And we also use the Google Calendar. So we have like a shared calendar, and I put all the deadline dates on there, and I keep track of that through Google and Google Task as well.
So they can, let me ask you, because I'm not familiar with it, on that calendar, Julia, are they able to interact with you? In other words, they can
Yes.
say.
Well, I
Okay.
don't share it fully with the clients. It's between me and Sarah, but I'll invite them to events like the closing date. I have that on our calendar. And you can invite people to it by adding their email address, and they can accept it or decline it. But that's how I get it on their calendar.
So let's say you have the seller and there's a municipal inspection required. Do you put that responsibility on the seller to get that completed?
Sometimes
the
it
appointment?
depends on the client. If they need help, we help them schedule it. If they're pretty self-sufficient, they can do it on their own. But we make sure that they know the deadline for that. And we keep up with them and make sure they get it done in a timely manner.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Neil, I know you're a perfectionist, so what do you use?
I use, believe it or not, a spreadsheet, my favorite tool in the world. And I also put it in my phone calendar and with all the
Okay.
alerts. And so I make sure, and I kind of, when I do the spreadsheet, I'll print it out and post it on the wall in front of me in my office. So I kind of have to look at it every day.
Okay. Kay, what about you?
Well, we have, fortunately, I have Kristen helping me with files, so that works out fantastic. But we put together we call it the next steps. So basically we do, we do the deadlines on the contract. We let them know about, when the inspections are set up, who the inspection's with, timing and all that kind of stuff. And then we go through, if it's a seller, when municipal is due and all that. So we have basically the timelines in the contract. We categorize that for them and then send it to them. And, and then Kristen introduces herself as somebody that's going to be helping as well. And it works out great because then that way, we're all kind of in communication. But, we were just mentioning that we like the what Julia and Sarah are doing too about, the Google calendars and, reminders and things like that. So.
Okay. I need to get familiarized with how that Google Calendar. I do like the Google Docs. I've been using that. So Randy, what about you? Everett, what do you use to keep organized?
I need to be more organized. I mean, I don't have enough business not to remember things. I kind of remember things like an elephant. Not right now, I don't have a system, but the ideas that are being shared seem to be very effective. So if I get busier, I won't miss a deadline. But pretty much from my experience, once you make a mistake, like a building inspection deadline, especially, you don't make that mistake anymore.
Right. So I want to elaborate a little bit on the inspection notice deadline. So let's say you have the seller. I'm the listing agent, Brent's my client. And today is day 10, and I have not got back the inspection notice from the buyer's agent. Me personally, I'm going to go to Brent and say, Brent, I haven't gotten anything back from the buyer's agent. Now, we all know if we don't get it back by midnight, the buyers can't ask for anything, right? But ultimately, we want to put this deal together. We want to make it happen. So I go to Brent. Brent, I haven't got anything from that buyer's agent. Do you want me to let it expire and they can't ask you for anything? Or would you like me to remind them? And Brett, what would you say?
We were talking about this last night, Lynn. I think, we always got to remember that the ultimate goal is to get to the finish line with the clients, both the seller and the buyers. So unless, as Creighton said last night, unless you just really dislike that person and you'd like to see them, burn, the thing that you want to do is try to keep the deal in play so that it gets done. And I think that they'll remember that too. We're in the business of being in other deals. And, when you're in a deal, when you've got 4 or 5 deals that are pending and they're looking at them, and they might think about, hey, that agent really helped me out last time and they're easy to work with. And those can make or break, another deal. So you need to kind of be thinking of the big picture.
I think if I'm the listing agent and I've got 12 offers on the table and one's from Kay Roberts, and I've done deals with her before, and maybe she helped me out, I'm going to tell my seller, hey, she's been a great agent. She's really good to work with. But if you're that agent that didn't tell the other agent, hey, you're about to miss this deadline. But I do think you need to ask permission to your client first to get the answer. I don't think you should, because you have to do your due diligence. And ultimately, it's up to your client.
I also think agents talk a lot amongst themselves. So it's going to be easier for that agent to talk bad about you that you let that
for
timeline.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Where
Yes.
negative news travels a whole lot faster. Isn't there like a statistic you have on that, Brent, or something?
Yeah, people love to talk about the bad, and you got to do, triple the good to get that out there. But, there's not, if you weigh this situation, there's a lot more good that can come out of it by being and doing the right thing. And I agree with what Lynn's saying too. Obviously you want to talk to the person that you represent to make sure that they don't want this deal to go another way. You don't know that.
Well, it's not a good feeling. I'm going to tell you that when you miss a deadline, especially on an inspection notice, and where there's a lot of things that need to be fixed or repaired, placed, and now it's on you because you missed that deadline. You want to hope that you're working with an agent that is professional and wants to do the right thing. I hope it never happens to any of you, but it can by accident.
One time I forgot that I did something. I met a deadline, but I completely forgot doing it and went into panic mode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the lender was not going to make the loan contingency deadline. And I started thinking, Christ, did I send that on time? Did I even send it? And so I madly went through all my emails and fortunately found it. But that was enough to scare me. Like Chuck said, you do that once, you never want to do that again. That's a bad feeling.
Yeah.
That's why we get gray hair when we're 40 in this industry.
Or
We
20.
miss we miss a night's sleep or two over things like that. So we're going to work on something. Hopefully, I want to see what Brent and Kristen can come up with too, in some terms of keeping organized. But I do like your idea of the Google Calendar and your spreadsheet. Hey, whatever works, that's great. Jamie, I didn't ask you, what do you do to keep organized?
I actually just ordered a new planner. I just make sure that the planner that I use is like one that is efficient for me. But I do like the digital calendars too. I just don't love to use it on my phone. So I prefer to carry a planner around with me.
Yeah, me too. Well, the thing is, if something happens to your phone, and I think we've all had that happen at some point in our life where the phone didn't work or, couldn't find it. So I've had to go on Facebook and get a hold of somebody and ask them to call me because I couldn't find my phone. And I had started laundry that morning early, and all I could think about was that my phone was probably in the washing machine.
So we also write the deadlines on the file. So on the front of our file, we have like on the right side at the top, we have like a little list that we just write out all the deadlines for that file. And we have
Oh, yeah.
the big dry erase board too that we have in the office, which is,
Well, that's good, yeah.
I think that those are like really the primary ones that we use. But like if we're out of the office, it's nice to get those notifications from the Google Calendar so that you don't forget, like tomorrow's the deadline for whatever, you know,
Mhm.
so that we both get those notifications. So that's nice.
So Julia, do you find that the calendar is easy to use?
Yeah, it is, but it's also one of those things that when you have those notifications coming up all the time, it's easy to like stop looking at them. I find that's a problem with me. I have a calendar on my phone. I have an Android. So there's a calendar right on my home screen, but it's been there forever and I blocked it out. Like I just don't even really look at it anymore.
Oh,
So-
gotcha.
So that's why we have like a few different things that we use to keep track of stuff, because maybe you miss that notification on your phone or something, you know, so it's just good to have a few different systems.
I do like that alarm that's on there, that you
Yeah.
said it. Yeah, I do like that. Okay, question 13, I just had, I had this happen the other day and I thought I'd talk about it, especially when you may miss a date. So you write 7 days for inspections on the sale contract. The contract acceptance deadline is April 1st. The seller signs the agreement on March 31st. When do the days start to count for the inspection deadline?
April 1st.
One.
That's right. So someone thought they missed a deadline when actually they didn't, because they were going by the date that it was signed, not the acceptance deadline date. So I just want to make sure. I knew you guys knew the answer, but thought it was good to talk about that for a second. And yeah.
Can we talk about the inspection notice? So I've heard some discrepancy on it before, but so if the agent sends you the inspection notice on, like, say it was April 1st that they sent it to you, but this buyer signed it on like March 20th or March 29th maybe, but they didn't send it to you till April 1st. What date do you start your resolution deadline? On the
So
day
they
they
got it
signed?
to you, so let me ask you a question, so they got it to you on time. But
Yeah,
they didn't-
within the
date
timeline.
would start, to me, the date starts when you received it, so it would start on April 2nd.
Okay, so not on the date that the buyer signed.
Right, because they may have the buyer sign, they may be, I hate to say this, but I'm going to, they may be trying to, maybe they missed the deadline date and they're trying to make you think that the buyer signed it on time, even though they didn't get it to you on time.
Oh,
Does that
okay.
make sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
it's on receipt of the document.
Oh,
Otherwise,
okay.
if you think about it, they could say, hey, I'm gonna put March 29th in there because that's when it was due to Julia, even though I didn't send it until April 1st.
Okay, so even if they sent it on April 1st and they're outside of the time frame, they still would be out, you know, we wouldn't count the date that they signed, right?
No,
Okay. Okay,
yeah,
got it.
because I've had somebody do that before, thinking, well, but look at when they signed it, look when they signed it. No. That it has to do with upon receipt. You know, here's another thing that happens sometimes, and I think we've all had this, where you email somebody something, a contract, and then you don't hear from them. Well, you have to follow up with calls, and this happened to our agent this past weekend, where she actually sent the offer 7 times to the agent. She texted, she phone called, she's got everything documented and no response, crickets. So first thing Monday morning, I get a hold of the broker and said, hey, I'm just calling to make sure your agent's okay, that they're not, something happened because we're not getting a response. Well, it turns out all 7 times the agent sent it, it went into her spam mail. And it happened to be a property that she got, 30 offers on or something, but you should keep track of, how many times you called, how many times you emailed, text, try every method of contact that you can. Because in this case, they were all in her junk mail. And I don't know how you stop that from happening. It's the receiver that happens to. So the person who's sending it, I don't think there's anything you can do about that. It's always good to call that you're sending. I always would call before I even wrote the offer, because I don't want to spend an hour writing up an offer and having them sign it and it's already under contract. So in this case, our agent got the deal. So that was the best part of it. Have you had that happen where an offer came in and went into your junk mail? No.
No.
Okay. All right, well, I hope you all have a nice weekend and happy Easter.
Happy Easter to
Thank
you.
Lynn.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Lynn.
you too. All right, bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.